Hello and welcome to C Programming Zero to Neural Networks. In this part we are going to be building a documentation engine. So we're not actually going to be doing any C programming, we're going to have to do web dev unfortunately, because it would be a bit of a big program if we were going to write a website in C. Although it is possible, I may go through that sometime. But for now, what we need to do is make a documentation engine. So I shall explain the situation. So I knocked up this domain sort of placeholder when I started this series, and I've sort of left it like this. What I need is to build this domain up. And ideally what I need is a documentation rendering engine for all the reams of documentation I have created on neural networks. I need a place to put them and publish them, and it's going to help, especially when we get to going through the trickier parts of neural networks. Things like backpropagation. If you have a look around on the internet, backpropagation is a difficult thing to explain, and there isn't very many good explanations out there. There are some good explanations if you're starting from a place of being really good at maths to begin with and knowing lots of the terminology to begin with, but there's not a lot of things on the internet that are sort of good guides from the beginning, you know, I mean, from first principles, which is exactly what we're doing here in this series. We're building neural networks from scratch, so we're going to need really good explanations of things like backpropagation, and that's going to require some supplementary documentation. So explaining it in a video and going through the programming is obviously one facet of it, and we'll be doing that. But it's also going to be very handy to have sort of all my reams of documentation stored somewhere, and in a easy to use, easy to navigate format. And I want to build this domain up to be something good as well, because it's going to cover a lot more than just neural networks. In the end, it's going to become a place where I do all my sort of own personal projects, and sort of gradually, once we've covered the Zero to Neural Network series, we'll go into like advanced neural networks and other kinds of things, and eventually catch up to exactly what I'm working on in all my own programs. And this will be the domain where I sort of publish and do all those sorts of things. But at the moment, it's just a placeholder domain. So we're going to start today, and we're gonna start programming this domain. So what we're going to have to do is break this interface. So I have this kind of Zero to Neural Network sign up here and down here. I don't want to do web dev with this reduced size window, so we're going to have to break the interface. So let's do that. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Boom, and there we go. I'm just a floating window now on a web page. You'll notice that I did do some things on this design. I made it so it switched to a portrait view rather than a landscape view. But I just did this sort of tile design. It's not, I mean, it's a placeholder. It's just got some icons on it that I've used for some things. Right, so let's get started. So I've actually already made a directory called docs for it. So we're going to need an index page, aren't we? I'm going to be using PHP. I know it's not a very popular language these days, but it is very good, and it's great for prototyping because you can stitch different bits together, and it's good for modularizing things. Difficult word to say, modularizing, isn't it? So what do we need? We need a doc type HTML. We're going to need a body, a head first, aren't we? And we're going to need a body. Space them out a bit. And we're going to need a title. I will warn you, web dev is probably the least interesting thing to watch a video of. It's why there's very few live streamers who do web dev, because it is boring. And we're not going to do all of this domain as a video series, but I thought the initial prototyping and making the initial documentation engine might be interesting. It'll certainly give anyone who's watching an insight into how the series is going to take shape. So that bit will be interesting, but the actual programming bit here is not going to be very interesting. C programming is ace to watch. Even simple stuff I think is great. I love watching other people do C programming. Web dev, no, but nobody's interested in that. So we're going to call this a data core Linux. There's a reason why this is the domain name, and I will come to that later on when it becomes relevant. So we have now got a page. What shall we do? Right. So I've been thinking about how I want this to sort of look. If I do a quick search, let's do GNOME desktop. So you've got the old GNOME desktop. I was thinking of doing it sort of open image in new tab, making like a sidebar, a main sort of application bar. So we can have the sort of introduction to neural networks as the first application, and then inside of it we're going to have, I'm going to have to draw this out, aren't I? So here we've got our web page. That line wasn't very straight, was it? Actually, we've got a square, haven't we? We can do a square, can't we? Right, we've got a web page. Deleted it. And then we're going to have like a nav bar there. And we're probably going to have a top, in fact, we're definitely going to have a top bar as well. And then we're going to have our main document sort of in the middle, like that. And then we're going to have like a sub nav here for all the different sections of the document. And then maybe a progress bar there, and then this will just be sort of void space for now, and then we'll maybe have a title up there, and then we'll maybe have some options there. And the idea is that we do all this as a fixed layout with the document in the middle, so we can click a button maybe up here and make the interface disappear and just see the document, and then we can bring back the interface, the navigation interface, and move around, quick link around the document, or load up a different, like we'll have some buttons here like the GNOME desktop style, and this will be like network 1, more advanced networks, so introductory networks, more advanced networks, and so on and so forth, and then there'll be a separate document for each. That's what I was thinking. I think that might be the right way to go about it. Obviously this is what web pages are made for, documentation, so you know, it's not going to be the most advanced web app, but we can make it look nice at the very least. So let's see if we can build that. Let's make this application. Let's get rid of that. I don't use GNOME desktop, but that little side nav kind of suits web development. So what we're doing, we're working on this. Right, so what do we need? We're going to need a screen, aren't we? Need some kind of screen. We're going to have some CSS. I generally flick around a lot when I'm doing web dev, so you'll just have to get used to it. Let's make a CSS directory, cd into it, and we're going to need a style.php. I like to stitch together everything in PHP if I can. We're going to need a header, and we're going to do a content type text / CSS. And we're going to need to include that, aren't we? So we're going to need a link rel equals style sheet, type equals text / CSS, href equals CSS / style.php. That'll probably work. And then we're going to, in here, we're just going to include. So we're going to do include. And we're going to include primary.css. Let's make a primary.css. And we can specify the body, can't we? Let's see if everything's working. Background color. We're going to, let's make it dark just to check it works. Yeah, that works. Right, okay, so we've got a style sheet engine. We're actually going to put that back too, in fact. We don't need to specify background color, but we do need to do the typical margin 0 px, padding 0 px. This is not a guide to doing web dev. You could take it as a guide to doing rapid prototyping, but you won't see many people do web dev like I do. Now we need some things in our screen. Let's start with a top bar. And we're going to do index top bar. And we're going to include top bar.php. That'll do us top bar.php. And we can call that top bar. Right, now we need to include a style for our top bar. Let's call that top bar.css. And we're going to do .top bar. Right, now we need to set some styles for this guy, don't we? So we want position fixed, we want width 100%, top 0 pixels, left 0 pixels, height. How high should a top bar be? 50. Background, colour, 1F, 1F, 1F. There we go, we've got ourselves a top bar. We'll leave it at that colour for now. So what goes in the top bar? We definitely need a title, don't we? So let me need a title box. Top bar, title, and then we can have top bar, title, text, and we can have data core Linux, which we're not going to be able to see. In fact, you know what? We need to do the same thing for P, don't we? I can just about see that it's in the wrong place. Right. So what do we need? We need top bar, title, top bar, title, text. We'll do that as set color. There we go, we want that to be bigger, don't we? Font size 28 pixels, 29 pixels. It's not bad actually, but we've got completely the wrong font, haven't we? We need to set a primary font, don't we? Font family, let's go for Hack. There we go, that looks better, although it's too small now. 32. That's fine. We want this to be like a tile. What I want it to look like is like the interface is slightly above, so if we use a bit of box shadow magic we can make everything look like it's rested and the document's sunk in a little bit. We'll see how that looks. Let's see how that works. So if we do width to 50, height 40, let's make this position absolute as well, or rather fixed height. Top 5 pixels, left 5 pixels. Not wide enough. Wide enough. So we do box shadow 0, 0, 11 pixels, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. I'll just about be able to see a box. Well, you can't really. I've made the top bar too dark. Well, it's there. That I'm going to leave it for now. That'll do. Yeah. So we're only doing a bit of a quick prototype knocking up. So what do we need now? We need a nav, don't we? Index. Shall we call it main nav? Main nav. Main nav, and then we're going to have to do the same thing for the CSS. So we go to styles. We want a set of styles for that. See, if I do it like this, if I can completely change it and just knock entire sections out and start again with them and that kind of thing, which is why PHP is quite handy for prototyping. It gets a lot of criticism these days, PHP, and a lot of it's unfounded because, and it used to be a bit slow, but we're talking like 10 years ago. Now it's actually quite fast. I can do Node.js. I can use other backends. But there's something about PHP and the speed at which you can go from having nothing to having a fully working dynamic database up thing. It's a very fast language to work with. And it's particularly good for this, just stitching modularized parts together. So what do we want our main nav to be? So we need well, we've made that, right. So we want position fixed, left 0, top, well the top bar's 50, wasn't it? So we want the top to be 50. We want width to be about 100 pixels. We want height to be, we're going to have to do a calc, or clack even. Calc, we want 100 view height minus 50 pixels. And then background, color, what do we have? 1F, 1F, 1F. YouTube color that is, I think. Yeah, that fits, that fits. And then we're going to have buttons in there, aren't we? So we need I'm going to do everything with divs. So we just go straight to buttons. There's nothing else going to be in the main nav, so let's just do main nav entry. Or button. We're going to call it an entry. And then inside the entry, each entry is going to have an image. So it's going to have image source, and we're going to call this main nav entry image. We need to make them. Main nav entry image. And what do we want these to look like? We want these to be width 90 pixels. These are going to have lots of them, so float left. Margin left 5 pixels. Margin top 5 pixels. Background color 2F, 2F, 2F. Let's go for a bit of a grey theme overall. I haven't done a height. There we go. You can just about see that, can't you, on the screen? Doesn't look very well centered. It should be perfectly centered. Let's throw a box shadow around it. Box shadow. Try and make it look like it's floating. You can just about see it. It's far too subtle an effect, that, isn't it? It's barely even noticeable. Oh well, we'll run with it for now. Right, I've got some images. -r./icons, I think I call them. Shall we rename that to image? I think it's going to break the interface if I load it up. Net4 was the first one. I've already made a few icons. Main nav. We want img/net4.png, and we need to specify these as being width 90%, margin top 5%, margin left 5%. There we go, that's going to be our introduction to neural networks icon. Just put a few more in. You got to see how things look together, haven't you? I'm trying to remember some of the other ones. I think I've got a net 5 and a net 6, but I don't think they're in order. I think I even did one for the reinforcement learning, the snake. I actually had that snake reinforcement learning thing working, and I did this Q-learning, this Markov decision-making process, where you use Q-learning to make the gameplay snake. I got it working, and it was fine, it was learning, it was getting better, but it wasn't doing it in a very human-like way, you know what I mean? It was doing all this like jaggedy, going across the screen really jaggedy, where I don't play Snake like that. So I started thinking, how can I make it better? How can I make it play in a more human-like way? And I also was thinking, I'm not checking if I'm going to trap the tail, so as the game progresses, it's always going to end up dying by trapping itself by its own tail. So I was like, how do you figure that out? How do you program that? And I started playing around with it, and now it's ridiculous. Now it just doesn't work, and I haven't put it back to how it was working before yet. But it basically just continually crashes. It just always ends up crashing into the right wall over and over again, and never improves. It's almost as if it thinks that's the objective of the game. So I've completely messed that up, but I'll fix it. And my aim with that is to somehow improve it. Maybe I need to read up on a few other methods. But the Q-learning method does seem like the right one for Snake. So what you basically do is you add you specify features like getting the apple, and you give it like a reward for getting the apple, and then dying or crashing into a wall, you give it like a punishment. You basically use the same thing, a reward, but knock that down to like -10 for crashing into a wall and +100 for getting an apple. And it gradually over time figures out the right way to play the game and the wrong way to play the game. Well, it just figures out the right way to play the game. So I think that's the right method. It's just a matter of how you specify features for things like not crashing into your own tail. So I need to somehow figure out how to make it understand the sort of concept of a tail, which is, when you think about it, a series of things on a grid. So it's not an easy thing to fix, but anyway, so I've made an icon for that, so I can certainly go through that. I want these to glow a little bit. Shall we put a filter on them? Shall we do a filter drop shadow 003 pixels? There we go. Now they glow a little bit, don't they? There's another net. Is it 7? I don't think I did a 7. Yeah, I did do a 7. Yeah, so the 7 is the one that comes. That one goes there. I need to delete the other 7 now. I should have cut and not copied. 3CC. So we start off. We start off by. They're the wrong way around, they're the wrong way around. So 7 goes in the... I can just change the numbers, can't I? So that should be 7 and that should be 6. So I've been kind of prepping up for doing this. So we're going to start off by learning how to build a neural network. And then we're going to build like one input into lots of outputs. We're going to train ASCII image data. I've already made a few demo programs doing exactly this. One that's non-graphical, well, ASCII graphical, in the terminal, and then one that's full graphical using SDL. And we can train 3 images simultaneously, and it's a good way to get a good understanding of how neural networks learn, how they work, what they're actually doing, and seeing them in action is quite amazing. Sort of watching it all sort of unfold. So that is in the wrong place. The next one is in the wrong place. So this should be a 5 and that should be a 7. Is that right? And then we're going to do basically a network the other way around. We're going to feed in kind of ASCII image data and then run classification on it. So what we might do is get a network that can learn to differentiate between an A and a B and a C, different characters maybe, to get the idea of image classification. We'll do simple examples because you can scale up a simple example to a really complicated thing, but these are really good ways to learn neural networks. And then we're going to go on to multiple inputs, multiple outputs, which is going to be like normalized coordinates for images, different ways of learning. We can do image interpolation, that kind of thing. And then we're going to go on to reinforcement learning. And then I've got quite a few other things that I've already worked through, like done a bit of convolutional networks and that kind of stuff. But at the moment, just the reason why I'm going quite slow with the series is I'm spending a lot of time building demos to work up to and figuring out the right sequencing and ordering to do to explain the whole neural networks thing, which is going to take some time to kind of figure out. Actually, I mean, all this stuff I've got here, that's all done. So maybe I'm overthinking it, doing too much preparation. But what I want at the end of the outcome is to have the de facto series for how to get started with neural networks, which is why I've almost started with going from the C programming language and up, because it gives me time to get good at making videos and get used to making videos before we get onto the really interesting stuff of neural networks. And for anyone who doesn't know the C programming language, I'll go through it nice and simply, and I'm good at thinking of good examples. So once we get past this sort of like just going through the important functions and the basic fundamentals of the C programming language, actually get to making stuff, I'll think of good things to make. So the series will come alive at that point. Once we've got about another 10, 15, maybe 20 videos in, it'll start getting really good. and then I'll get better at making videos too, is the idea. So obviously this video is just another long form video. So as I improve my video recording, video making skills. So what do we need next? We need a document that actually goes in the middle here, don't we? So let's make a document. Shall we just call that doc? I think we call that doc. Index doc. Yeah. Doc. Right, style. Make sure I've done that right. Did I do the style right? Yeah, I did. Right, doc. So where's that going to go? Really, we want this to be position relative, don't we? I want the doc to use the to not have I don't want to make the document fixed because I don't want to have a separate scroll bar for it. I just want to use the global scroll bar on the browser. So that's going to have to be relative, isn't it? So, and what do we want? We want min height is going to be 100 view height minus 50 pixels. Width is going to be hard to figure out. Let's just do, let's make it 800 pixels. It's going to be width 800. My brain is scrambling a bit there. We want margin left to be 50% minus 400 pixels. We're not going to be able to see anything yet. Let's set a background colour. Kind of right. We want the margin top to be 50 pixels. If I set a min height, I think that'll still scroll, won't it? Might have to change that later on. Well, we certainly don't want it to be that colour, do we? We want it, in fact, we don't need it to have a background colour. But what we could do is do a box shadow inset 0011 pixels. Make it look like it's going inside the page. I might not keep that, but I'll leave that for now just so I can see where it is. And it is in accordance with what I originally wanted, which is kind of a Z-index style to it, like a 3D style to it, without being too annoying. I don't like that the title is over the top of the nav bar. I think we need like a void space here. Let's do that. So we want, up here we want div top bar void. And what do we want? That means this is going to have to move across. So if we make the nav's 100, so this is going to have to be 105 ish. We want this to be 90 pixels, height to be 40, can't spell height, height to be 40 pixels. We want left to be 5 pixels. We want the position to be absolute. We want the top to be 5 pixels, and then we can box shadow that as well, can't we? Oh yeah. Once again, you can just about see it. I mean, I could make these two Fs, couldn't I? So I could do background color 2F, 2F, 2F. At least you can see it. Yeah, we'll do that. Now the text needs to be indented. We'll do a margin left 5 pixels. I want those to have a bit of a border radius, not too much. So if we do border 4 pixels, we'll do the same thing for that. Yeah, and then we do the same thing for the nav buttons as well. So what were they called? They were called main nav, weren't they? We want a nav entry to have a border 4 pixels. Right, we're getting somewhere. I know this isn't very interesting, and that's not really the point. That's not really the point. When it's finished, it will be very interesting. So we can look back at this and go, and this is where it all started. Oh, my cat's coming. Don't jump on me, cat. We're doing programming. He's jumping on me. That title, I don't want to be over there. Come on, cat. I think the top bar title needs to be 100, so it lines up perfectly with that. Is correct. Right, that's enough messing with that. Next we need a doc nav, don't we? Doc nav. Doc nav. Doc nav. Make sure I've done that right. Doc nav. I did. I saved the docnav.php. rm docnav php. Right, so that's set up. So we want this bit here to be, what colour do we want that? We want that to kind of be a lightish grey, don't we? We need to get the size right. Position fixed. Spelled that all wrong, didn't I? Position fixed. Left 100 pixels. Top 50 pixels. Width, let's just do 300 pixels for the time being. Height is 100. View height minus. My cat is about to walk all over my keyboard, as he does about 5 times a day. I think he's given up. Minus 50 pixels, and then we'll give that a background color of green. So how do I get that width right? I need to do a calc on that width, don't I? So we want 100% minus 800 pixels minus 100 pixels. I think that will do it now. That's 50%. No. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. Is that right? If I shift that over a bit. Yeah, it looks right, doesn't it? Yeah, that's got to be right. What colour do we want that to be? We want that to be, should we do 2F, 2F, 2F? Kind of matches the buttons a little bit. What it'll do for now, it's going to have buttons on it. So this is going to have the subsections. So these are main apps. These need to highlight when we float over them, don't we? box shadow, 3 pixels, FF, 2 pixels. Isn't web dev really, really boring to watch? I'm sorry I'm making this video, people, but it needs to be done, and if I make a video of it, it gets me started rather than just, well, I did make these icons, but something I would probably never get around to. Once I start on something, I'll just carry on with it, but it's the getting started because I work on about 50 things at the same time, so bringing in another thing to work on. I don't like this gap here. I don't want that to be there, so that doesn't seem quite right. So if we change this to a margin bottom, try and avoid using margin bottoms, but that looks more lined up now. So let's do our entries for our doc nav. So what do we need? We need a div. We probably need a doc nav list because we're going to be making this dynamic. We're going to have to handle all this with JavaScript. So when we click on that, we're going to repopulate that list and load up a different document. So we'll have a doc nav list, which I'm guessing we can just leave blank for the moment. And in a doc nav list, we're going to have a doc nav list entry. And in a doc nav list entry, we're going to have a doc nav list text. Doc nav list text, list entry text. And the first one is going to be introduction. Right, so now we have to specify these. So we want these to be width. We definitely need to float them left again. Width in 90%. Margin left 5%. Height 70 pixels. It's probably a bit big. Background color green. We obviously don't want them to be green, do we? We definitely want to margin top these as well, don't we? I don't like mixing percentages and pixels in that way. They also seem too narrow. Shall we change this to, well, this has not got a fixed thing, so the width is going to have to be like that, so the margin left is going to have to be like that, isn't it? So we could make this 95 and 2.5. That looks a bit better. We're definitely going to need a border radius. And then the text needs to be text align right, maybe, because it's going to be like a nav. Oh, we need an indicator here, don't we? So this does need to be a bit narrower, doesn't it? So we might make this back to 90 again. Adding right 5 pixels. Oh, we want margin right, don't we? How do you move text in? Oh, I'm not doing the text, that's why. There we go. Font size 22 pixels. Introduction. make this background color 2F, 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 and then we want a box shadow. That doesn't look right, it looks too dark. Oh, it's because they're text writing. Right, introduction. It's not going to look right until I've got this bar here, so let's make that bar. What do I call that? What do you call a bar that indicates the place you're in a document? We could call it a docnav bar. Let's just call it a docnav bar. And then inside the docnav bar we're going to have a docnav pointer, aren't we? Docnav bar pointer. Or indicator, maybe. Doc nav bar. Doc nav bar pointer. I should have made a cup of tea before making this. How long have we been going for? 41 minutes. So what we want, they want position absolute, right 0 pixels, top 0 pixels, width 10 pixels, background color, oh, height. Not wide enough. 20 seems a bit excessive. 15. It's probably wide enough for an indicator, isn't it? Go back to 20 for now. We can always reduce it after. So we want that to have a different background color. Is that the same color as the background yet? But we can box shadow it so it looks like it is floating like everything else. You need to rethink the colour scheme. It's obviously very grey themed, but the idea is to make the content stand out and not the interface stand out. But I do think I need a bit more of a depth to the colours. Right, so now we need to make the pointer. So what do we want? We want position. We want width. Well, it's 20 pixels. Let's make this 15 pixels. Margin, well, left. 2.5 pixels. Margin. We do margin top, can't we? 30 pixels. Height is going to be and make it a circle, aren't we? And we got a little dot. What colour do we want the dot? I think we do my standard blue. Make it glow a little bit. That's not bad actually. The main screen down there, up there. This doesn't look very good. Let's throw some more in and then see if we can make them look better. So let's put a gap there, 3YY. Let's make 4P. So after introduction we cover perceptrons, and then we do neurons, and we do cost, loss function, and then we do our first neural network, 1 neuron, 1 input, 1 output. and text is too big. That actually looks considerably better, just a bit of a change on the text size. Let's see what they look like when they're highlighted. So, by making a hover. Two before. So as you move through the document, these will highlight. We need a settings up there, don't we? So we need that in our top bar. And we'll finish up shortly. Let's do this down here. Top bar settings. We've already got a top bar, haven't we? Put this at the end. Top bar settings. Pretty much the same as the title, except we want this to be on the right. Pixels. And in there we can put some buttons. We probably want it to be a bit bigger. So that's this up here now. So the idea is we'll have a document here. Let's put some sample text into our document. P what we call this doc text. So we need to, in fact we need something around this, don't we? What we're going to call this doc entry. We'll call that doc entry text. Doc entry. Doc entry text. And we can do width 90%. Margin left up top. 20 pixels, margin left 5%. There needs to be a padding. There we go. Font size 22 pixels. And then we can change this to, like, for example, perceptrons. And then we can just throw in some fake text underneath. Well, we need a header, don't we? That looks like we're going to have different categories, aren't we? .28 pixels. Sample text. Anyway, I won't do any more on it than that. So, oh, I'm just going to finish off that right panel there, so it actually looks good. So we need one more of these. Index, shall we just call it right? Essentially void space. Right, what do we need to do here? We need position, absolute, right 0 pixels, height is same again, 100 view height minus 50 pixels, and then width, should we just do 400 for now, background color is, that's not worked, has it? Well, that's working. I've just done something with the CSS wrong. Right, height, width. Yeah, I hadn't put a top in, 50. Right, so height once again is calc. See what I did there? I second guessed myself. I'd done everything right and I ended up checking everything other than the thing that was right in front of me. So width calc, this is going to be a tough one. It's going to be 50% minus 800 pixels. No. Minus 400 pixels, isn't it? Let's just check that works. Right, 100. Yeah, it's the right size. And then we need to make that into the, what was it, 2F, 2F, 2F. So we've got a very grey themed document rendering engine. Well, it's a beginning. Well, we've got started and we get to see a little bit of where we're going with neural networks. I'll finish filling them out. So doc nav, and we'll, so what have we got here? After we do 1 euro, do 1 euro, 2 inputs, 1 output, and then we're going to do activation functions, and then we do 3 neurons, 2 inputs, 1 output, and then well, not finally, because there's a lot more to do after this, but we finally get to a very important stage where we do n neurons, n inputs, n outputs, and then we do, I've got a cat again, back propagation, and then we have to do stochastic gradient descent, and these only just about fit on the page, so we're going to have to make these a little bit shorter, aren't we? Too much. There we go, so that'll be the index for the first part. So this is what we're going to begin with in this series as we work through it. So once we've covered a bit of the C programming language, the good thing about neural networks is we don't have to know everything about the C programming language. We only need to know a handful of things about it to actually be able to program all this stuff. We need to understand floats, we need to understand random numbers, which we've now covered. We need to understand pointers, which is going to be a tough one, but it's not like we're using a massive amount of pointers. We just need to be able to use the malloc function and understand the difference between heap memory and normal memory. Actually, there is quite a lot to go through on the C programming, but the point is we don't have to understand everything. We don't have to understand how to build a web server. We don't have to understand how to interface with the kernel. We don't have to understand lots of complicated things about the C program language that we can do and we can achieve. We're heading in one direction, so we need a handful of library functions, and then we need to get good at programming neural networks with them. And this is what the direction the series is going to go in. once we've covered the basic C fundamentals. How long have we recorded for? Nearly an hour. Nearly an hour. That's about right. I wanted to do this within an hour. I've not hardly said anything for the last 20 minutes. I don't think. I've just been trying to finish it off. So this is what I wanted to get to. This was my prototype that I had in mind. That looks basically like that. I think it may be a little bit too grey. The idea is you can press a button up here and all that interface is going to disappear and you're just going to be left with a plain document that you can scroll through. And everything's fixed, the whole layout's fixed, so that'll all stick normally, but we can scroll up and down with the normal page up, page down keys. I'm reversing the trend of making the internet the most frustrating thing in the world to use. I'm determined to make this the most effortless bit of neural network documentation you're going to find. And we're going to start off all that section is just that one application. Once we've done that, then we move on to that, and then we move on to that, then we move on to that, and then we move on to that. So you can imagine it's going to be quite a lengthy series. As I said, what I'd like to do is build up a significant following on the internet, and enough of a following so that I can fund my own AI research eventually. And that might take a bit of time, and I'm certainly not going to do any trying to sell products and do a quick word from our sponsors or anything like that. Don't worry, I'm not that kind of guy. The way I see it is if you can just get enough people following you, then you can make money from advertising revenue, apparently, so the story goes. And I don't know how many subscribers you need. I imagine it's hundreds of thousands, but there's got to be hundreds of thousands of people in the world who are into learning machine learning and neural networks. I mean, they're so ridiculously interesting. I'm surprised I've got as many subscribers as I have right now. I've got a couple of hundred, I think, and I would have, because I want to go through really basic C programming stuff, and I'm not exactly outputting on a regular basis or anything right now, which I will build up to doing like clockwork, if you know what I mean. But for now, I'm just practicing getting good, but actually, you know, making a whole series that begins with me getting good and begins with going through the C programming language. So there's a purpose to everything. But I'm hoping that when we do get to programming neural networks, that I do start building up some decent amount of subscribers, because I think it's all about just making good examples. So once we've gone through all this, which is going to be fascinating to go through, and once we can program all this in the C programming language, then it's really about applying this framework to, or applying this library of functions that we're going to end up with a way to build neural networks in C that we'll have explained throughout the whole way through the beginning, and we'll learn what neural networks are and the essence of them by doing this, by looking at it from a programming perspective and not purely a maths perspective, or like in Python where you're just using pre-written libraries and all the magical stuff is abstracted away. You don't get to see how that works, and to be honest, is that all those bits are written in the C programming language anyway. They're just C programming bits that are imported into Python because Python's too slow to do this kind of stuff, which is why they've just made the language called Mojo. Have you heard of Mojo? Of all the new languages that have come out recently, there seems to be a never-ending stream of new languages now. I'm not that massive. I mean, you've seen I still use PHP. I'm not that massively into new languages. My attitude is if I've got something and it works and it's good for rapid development, then there has to be a very good reason for me to abandon that thing. And I did learn Node.js because I was interested in it, and it's good for lots of small amounts of data. You know what I mean? It's designed for that, but I still prefer PHP. But yeah, of all the new programming languages that have surfaced over recent years, Mojo is about the only one that looks remotely interesting to me. And it's because it prioritizes execution speed. It's rapid from what I understand of it, and it's adopted a lot of C and C++ principles of in its design. So we'll see how we get on with Mojo. I might learn that. I might even do a little series about learning Mojo. Maybe do a first impressions kind of thing. We'll see. The main thing is to crack on with C programming zero to neural networks. And I'm really looking forward to getting up to, I mean, I've sort of introduced perceptrons, and I can go through neurons without having to have finished the C series. And I can even introduce cost and loss functions, but I don't want to get started on actually this whole thing. I want this to be, once we've covered enough of the C language to do this, then we can just delve into this. And this won't take very long to go through because that is very similar to that. And then activation functions, a couple of videos that'll cover that. I mean, we kind of learn more about activation functions as you apply them and learn all that. But the basic idea isn't that very complicated to explain. So we'll get to certainly here very, very rapidly once we start on the neural networks, applying, actually building the neural networks. And then this bit, I'm determined to make the best explanation from first principles and put it on the internet. One of the reasons why I'm taking my time with this series is making sure when we get there. I mean, so I'll load it up. What did I call it? 1. Z2NN. This is a big chunk of my documentation. It doesn't include the back propagation bit, but you can scroll down for ages. Loads of ticks in there, ticks, pictures and that. 7,260 lines in one document. And that's just one part of the documentation that I'm sort of transposing into this. And my back propagation bit, I've rewritten it a couple of times, all in LaTeX. And it's not easy to explain from first principles. But I'll get there. I'll get there. I'll get it done. Right, that does it. What we on 1 hour, 1 minute. So I don't think this was a very interesting video. Sorry if you've watched all the way till the end. Here we are. Pretty soon I'm going to have a really good documentation engine. And as we go through the series, I'll put the documentation on here. I'll link to any relevant videos that I've made in the series so far, and I'll put Git links to my GitHub where I'll post all the code examples that we end up building in the series, so you can quickly just Git link them and download them if anyone's interested. I'm personally not into using Git or downloading other people's code. I like to build things for myself. I'd highly recommend anyone watching this does the same thing. Right, well there you go, that's a bit of web programming. It looks actually quite good. It's going to need some work to go through the overall design. It's definitely too grey. But I do want it to look a little bit boring. My cat's coming back at me again. Let's call it a day at that before my cat interrupts me. Right, I'll see you next time in the next instalment of C Programming Zero to Neural Networks. Say goodbye, cat. See you later.